What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. I hope you are having a great start to the weekend already. I've had a great day so far. Things are good. I got an early copy of this book called The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath, the Heath brothers. They made to Stick, Switch, Decisive, all really great books. I just got this today. I haven't even cracked it open. But I think it's going to be a good one. So I've had an awesome day so far. I've been working, one of my big challenges today, it was more of an assignment, was working on a guest blog post. Hopefully you'll see it in the near future, but it stemmed from the work that we were doing on our mobile stuff. That they were interested in the stuff that we did on, I launched this. There's another video that I did about the mobile development we did. I did an interview with Michael Dwan. We talked about our C# development. A lot of people have been very interested in that. Like, why did we choose C#? Why did we choose these Microsoft tools and Xamarin versus things like focusing just on like Ruby and building it as a web app? And writing these containers around it, or more commonly, why don't we focus on iOS development and Android/Java development? So we're writing a blog post that kind of goes into more of that decision why, maybe the less technical bits. And here's an interesting story that I crossed paths with along the way. There's a really famous A-list agent for directors, a guy named Robert Newman. He has, I don't know if he still does, but in the past, he has represented the likes of like Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, a lot of A-list celebrities. Like, the guy is really well known. So this new filmmaker wanted to get on this guy's radar, and so he cold calls this guy, gets the guy's secretary, convinces her that it would be cool if he dropped off a trailer for his new movie that he made. I don't know, he was a very charming guy, and he got through, and he drops off a trailer. 3 days later, Robert Newman calls him back, and he says, "I loved it." The guy's impressed. Immediately starts asking this filmmaker, like, how much did it cost? And the filmmaker's like, he's like $7,000. And Robert Newman's like impressed. Like, he's like, that's pretty good. Like, this is back in the 90s. And even back then, trailers cost about like $20,000 to $30,000 on average to make. So Robert Newman's already impressed by this guy's resourcefulness. But Robert Newman misunderstood, or the filmmaker misunderstood. It wasn't that the trailer cost $7,000. The entire movie cost $7,000. And Robert Newman obviously was blown away. This movie got published, got distributed by some major stuff. That movie was El Mariachi. The filmmaker was Robert Rodriguez. The movie cost $7,000 to make, but it made over $2,000 in the box office. Not a huge amount, even in 1990 standards, but a huge ROI from just spending $7,000 making a movie. It's a great example of a guy who learned to stretch a dollar and make money work. And if you read more into the story, I mean, he did everything from, like, most of that money, half of that money was from him spending a month at a hospital in an experimental drug study. He had to live at this hospital, but it paid him $3,000. And that was, half that budget that went into that movie of filming El Mariachi. And there's plenty of bits in that story of just him being resourceful about what he had around him to kind of create this movie, from using a wheelchair as a dolly and condoms filled with blood or fake blood, to create the special effects. I mean, the guy was just obsessed with what was near him because he didn't have any money to pay for fancy cameras, fancy equipment, etc. That is what has inspired me to run the things that I do at Highrise the way we do. So when we took over Highrise, this isn't a humble brag at all. I mean, this has been published by not just me, but Jason and other people in the Highrise universe. Highrise makes millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars in profit, and we're just 7 people. And, I think a lot of people in our situation, we'd be organizations like 3, 4, 5 times the size that we are right now. But we keep it small because I, like Robert Rodriguez, have come from starting a business with $18,000, and we had to stretch it to pay for rent and servers and our livelihood. And we made that money work, and we made that money turn into something that paid us normal salaries and a piece of software that continued on for 5-6 years until it was acquired and has kind of moved on to other things. But it's taught me on how to be creative with a dollar. And that is the philosophy that I bring to something like High Rise. Like, I am not going to waste my time spending money on a lot of different projects. Because we spend the money the way we do, we try to be as resourceful as possible, and we try to be as prioritized as possible. So when we plan things, we're constantly prioritizing. Like, are we working on the thing that is the most important? Something that a lot of people I think would find interesting, there is no true word called priorities. The original word was priority. It's singular. It wasn't until like the late 1900s, if you do a Google trend search on this, or maybe it's a books, there's something, maybe an Ngram search in Google where you could kind of see a word usage in literature. And if you watch, like, priority is the word that's used for like centuries. And then it was like late in the 1900s where the word priorities all of a sudden appears. Priority. We should work on like the most important thing. And so when you focus on small budgets and small teams, you're constantly focused and reprioritizing to figure out what is the one most important thing that you should be working on. And so that's how we operate. And so when we were working on this, on our mobile app situation, we originally created a iOS app, and then we were moving on to, well, are we gonna have to spend more money to bring in some Java help to work on an Android version? It was the decision was more clear that it's like, no, how can we do it ourselves with the current team? And it was like, well, we could learn something like cross development on mobile. And so Michael went forth and he started looking at all these different solutions, and he found C# and the Xamarin platform that could work on cross platforms. And it was clear to us, like, that would allow us to stretch ourselves. We could get 1-2 people that are currently on the team building 2 apps at one time, and still only working on this part-time, as opposed to spending more and more money on more and more people. And I think, like, we've been getting a lot of great reviews on our mobile app. I feel really good that we've invested in this kind of architecture now that allows us to, get changes out to Android and iOS really quick without ballooning our team. But keeping the small team allows us to, like, we move really fast, we communicate very well, there's not a lot of indecision. All 7 of us get together in one meeting really easily and can bang out a meeting really fast, versus a team of 15 people where I need multiple meetings and coordinating between multiple things. And so I'm kind of obsessed with starting small and stretching as much as you can before you grow into something bigger. And that's why I believe in bootstrapping versus VC funding, but it's more nuanced than that. I believe in bootstrapping first. Maybe you discover something like you need to raise a lot of money, but start small, learn how to spend $1 and stretch it for all it's worth, and to find the resources that are laying around you that are free before you start spending money and getting really lazy with how you spend money. Like Robert Rodriguez, you will get more creative with how you spend money. And I think it shows in his other movies. Like, he turned down big budget films like X-Men and Planet of the Apes, and he still did some bigger budget things like the Spy Kids trilogy. But even then, Spy Kids, he was editing it out of his garage. There's another story of him. He wanted a cameo of George Clooney. I think it was in the final movie. He goes to George Clooney's house with a camera and films it in George Clooney's living room. This would be like an absurd story for most directors today who spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a movie. They would never put up with something like showing up to a star's house and just kind of quickly getting a shot in on the guy's couch. But that's what Robert Rodriguez does, because he's used to it and he's cool with it, and he looks for opportunities like that. I think a lot more of us need to look for opportunities like that. We need to practice. So practice with stretching $1. Practice by just assuming you're not going to spend your money, and you're going to find everything in your vicinity to help you get your next project done, or run your startup, or make your movie, or make your book. And I hope that inspires you guys a little bit. I am going to see this chat up now. Good evening, John. Thanks everybody for watching and tuning in. Thanks for the head start. Yeah, I'm gonna try and do more head starts to these because there's too much dead air when I'm doing this. Priorities took off in the 1990s, Andre says. Yeah, it's crazy, right? Now all of us talk about, like, what are your priorities? Man, that's bullshit priorities. Like, what is your priority? What is the number one thing that you should be focusing on, and everything else is, like, you could ignore? And not enough of us are doing that, right? Even our bosses and managers, they're like, what do you get? Tell me the 3 things that are your priorities. No, not 3 things, 1 thing. Jim, hello, what's going on, guys? With higher rise profit margin, sounds like you guys can afford to spend money on customer acquisition. What do you think of customer acquisition? John says, I don't know, I don't love that either. We do spend a little bit of money on customer acquisition. I have been experimenting with it, with things like, we've been experimenting with like banner ads, pay-per-click ads, and paying attention to our conversion rate, what we can have to spend on this. Still not in love with it, just because it's so easy for everybody else to compete on that. It's a race to the bottom, in my opinion. If I spend X dollars per click, and I've done this before, every other competitor finds out about this. You just get like a short-term advantage if you discover something. But I'm already competing against like huge competitors, the Salesforces, etc. They're spending a shit ton of money on customer acquisition. And I can compete with them on some levels, but it's just like we both race to the bottom, and we both race to a point where none of us are making any money. And some of us are even selling our software at a loss. I'm not going to say who, but there's some people who are operating at a loss just because they're trying to upsell some other product of theirs. But I'm not in love with paying for customer acquisition unless it's done more intelligently. Spending money on things like learning how to do publicity better, or market ourselves at trade shows. Like, something about trade shows and developing our brand is a little bit more scalable than like trying to buy a click. But that doesn't mean there's actually some smart things to do with pay-per-click ads that actually isn't about customer acquisition, that is still really important for like marketing and branding. I'll get into that in a future episode. It's been 12 minutes. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and spending a part of your Friday evening with me. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and I will see you again tomorrow, everybody. If you got any questions, nate.cotney@gmail.com or Twitter or any of the YouTube comments, I will reply to them and record them and answer a question later. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you again later. Good night, everybody.